Welcome to Ryan Rambles, episode 2 of Ryan Rambles. And I didn't like the intro music that I decided on, which was actually, I subscribed to Artlist, which is a free, no, it's not free, it's royalty free, which it isn't even that because you're paying a monthly or yearly fee to get music that YouTube won't flag and tell you that you should go to jail and all that stuff. But I that was the one I settled on after not enough. Okay, here's the issue. I like music. I like a specific type of music, even though my interests have broadened, certainly over the years and most recently. But anytime I go to find, something punk adjacent, it's all poppy. It's not, that's kind of the nature of the beast there when it comes to royalty-free music. Is it's got to be lowest common denominator. Sounds probably more dismissive than it needs to, because there are actually very good artists on that platform, on any platform. There's a few of them out there besides Artlist, and they do great work. I don't want to diminish that at all, but it definitely needs to be for the masses to some extent. So I run into that issue. And even though I felt like that song I used last episode was about as good as I could do, I thought, what if I took a new song from my actual library every week? And this is where it gets a little bit dicey. I don't know if even that old adage that if you only play a certain amount of seconds of any song, you can't get dinged for copyright or however that goes. I don't know if that's true, but I will try to keep it underneath that imaginary number of seconds either way. And in so doing, be like, hey, that's an actual song that I actually like. And if everything went smoothly, I used probably the most offensive is also a word that's probably not appropriate in this context, but certainly less for the masses song that is also one of my favorite songs of all time. And it's probably because I've been going down a bit of a Bomber Manzulo rabbit hole, which, if you know what that means, I've already reached my target audience, and I could probably just wrap things up at this point. But he was a drummer for that band, for that song that I introduced this podcast with, called RKL, Rich Kids on LSD. So there's a longer story to be told there, but the drummer is just this fantastically technical drummer that went on to do many other projects besides RKL, and I've finally been delving into some of those. He had a group that was just called The Other that I've been listening to a little bit, and maybe I'll use one of their songs to introduce, I don't know, episode 100, because I feel I've got a lot of songs to get through before I start using new bands to introduce. But I don't know. Again, no rhyme or reason to what I do here for the most part in this podcast, except I did allude to wanting to do an episode on Phase 2 last episode. So that's when I said I was putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because I was talking about the iPhone and stuff like that. I want to talk about where Ryan Runs is headed, and specifically something I'm calling Phase 2 of Ryan Runs. And I know I've been at this particular channel for more than a year, and that might sound a little bit weird to some to be like, okay, after a year and change is Phase 2. And I'll try to be both extremely personal and yet far too general at the same time. But in a creative field, or maybe just in my creative field, and I don't mean that of video or media or whatever, I just mean like my own little personal field that I create around myself, I take a long time, number one. So taking a year to figure something out is actually pretty quick for me. Let's put it that way. I'm 40 something at this point, and to say that I've taken that long to figure some things out would not be an exaggeration. So if I'm taking a year to figure out my YouTube channel, man, I am the progress I have made is to be lauded at the very least. But number two, when it comes to actually being creative, that's a godsend. Time is just a godsend. One of my favorite quotes is Taika Waititi out there talking about how sometimes you'll just open up your laptop and stare at a blank screen for a while. And that qualifies as writing. Even if you didn't write anything that day, you technically did. And I very much believe in that. I've got a lot of projects that I feel like stimulate my creativity here and there. And I don't just mean there are activities that I do to get the juices flowing or whatever. I just have a lot of irons in the fire. And whenever I'm tired of staring at any one thing, I find that keeping my brain engaged with something different. And I have to be careful. And this is another episode that I already have listed as one to make, which is funny because it's on checklisting. So I need to be careful not to checklist. That's definitely something I do here and there. Just because I can check something off a list doesn't mean I've actually been productive or done something. But we'll come back to that, I'm sure. But when it comes to being creative, taking a year to figure something out, even if I do wish it was quicker in a lot of, I wish I would have figured out a lot of this a long time ago. But let's live in the moment, okay? Let's talk about the matter at hand here. And full disclosure, or two full disclosures even, I don't feel well. That's why I sound a little bit strange. We just got back from a cruise. In fact, right now, in my mind, pretty much delineates the summer from the fall because I spent an uncharacteristically large amount of time vacationing this year for whatever reason. The cruise was just the last one of those that happened. We've been meaning to go for some time, and it turns out my sister was going, so we tagged along, and they were nice enough to let us do so. So, number one, the actual full disclosure I wanted to get to, I know that if any professional YouTuber out there were to stumble across my channel, the number one thing they would tell me would be to focus. I've got a lot of series going on. I've got live streams going on, which series and live streams aren't necessarily different, but I've just got a lot of different, it seems, directions in which I'm going, whereas a lot of those would just be their own channel. Daily Drum is kind of the perfect example here. That should probably be its own channel, often its own thing, doing its own thing, which I do understand probably more than the rest of them because it does kind of clog up my feed. And I try to not actually put those unless it's every 100th episode. I'll actually push that out to the notification feed. But otherwise, it's just always there, always happening. So I can understand why somebody would be like, hey, put that on its own thing and then we can see what you're doing. If you go to my actual channel page, though, I feel a little bit better because my series should all be surfaced there a little bit more easily to understand. Anyway, focus would be what anybody would tell me when it came to my YouTube channel. I don't know if what we're going to talk about today is necessarily going to solve that problem. In fact, I might make it worse by introducing more shows and ideas that are coming up for phase 2, but I do have an idea with how I can mitigate some of that, and I guess I'll just say it up top. I think I need to focus on that. That's my solution to finding focus, is to focus, everybody. It's to focus on one show. So I've so far done this thing where I start a show, I get a number of episodes in, and then for whatever reason, whether it's work or even just that creative idea having to take time, I'm halfway through a bunch of shows now. So I think I need to just focus on one of those until it gets to where it's going to be. And I'm going to talk about where each of those shows is going to be. So maybe by the end, I will know which show I'm going to buckle down on. So for now, let's do that. I'm going to go through each one of the shows I've got going on my channel, talk a little bit about what I have in store for it, both in the near future, but also in the long term. So I've already mentioned Daily Drum, and that's, I feel like, always the show that needs the least amount of attention because it is just me. It's a daily thing I do. It's quite possibly more for me than anybody else. Although the viewing habits on those are so strange. I don't know. I mean, the YouTube algorithm is just a big question mark to some extent anyway, but with Daily Drum, it's weird. Some songs get 4 to 5 hits and others get hundreds. So it's very strange. I'm always curious about what sends one off. But anyway, that is not going to change so much. There will be kind of a season 2 or a Daily Drum 2 that is going to happen whenever I start going into customs. And I mean custom tracks, tracks that have been figured out and created by people after the fact, and I've imported into Rock Band. I've done a few of those already. Usually each 100th episode will be some custom track I pull from somewhere because I want to do something a little bit more personal for those celebration episodes, I guess you could say. But at some point, I'm going to run out of actual Rock Band 3 songs to play, even though I am going back and purchasing. In fact, they've come out with this date with which I think it's July 2024 sometime that you won't be able to purchase those songs on Xbox 360 at all. And right now it's a pretty good setup where you can purchase them and they show up on Rock Band 4. So there's a reason to make those purchases, I'm telling myself. So I'm going to keep doing that, but eventually when I run out of those, I am going to go to just custom tracks, which should be a lot of fun. I've got some ideas for themed weeks, because there's a lot more interesting music when it comes to the customs scene, let's say. So that's Daily Drum. Gameplay is another series that I've gotten kind of halfway through. It's also possibly the youngest of the series, I guess you could say, because it only has one episode and it's been the most recent. But I do have 5 episodes scripted out of that thing already, and it's not all Burnout related. The Burnout section just takes up 2 episodes. That is part of the reason I might not buckle down on this series exactly, is because episode 2 of that Burnout deal, it takes a little bit more work than the others. I've got to capture the footage. I've got to get the games, not in that order, obviously, but it just takes a bit. And also I feel like I've done that one most recently, so I kind of let it simmer. So I'm more likely to go back to Chasers, which is the other series I'll talk about. And that is very much more defined. So I do also have the remaining episodes of that series scripted out. But when I'm done with those, it's going to turn into kind of a supplemental thing where I'm just opening different packs of cards every week, because I do have, and I don't want to spoil the final episode there, but I do have some Marvel cards that I've bought from, I might have even already mentioned it, so maybe I'm not spoiling anything, but the plan is that I will just be opening those packs of cards every week, seeing if I can complete the series that I'm working on. And I will probably involve my daughter, I think, because that's how we've done the first half of the collection already. It's just me and her. I guess at this point, when she was even smaller, not so small anymore, used to open up those packs of cards together. So Chasers, honestly, is the front runner for maybe the series that I buckle down on here soon. So the other series you're going to see some more of are the Let's Plays. I giggle because they get the least amount of engagement, so there's probably the least reason to do more of those videos than any others. But they're easy, they're fun, and eventually I want that to be a series where we're playing kind of really left field games, and I think that's part of what I'm working on when it comes to the chemistry of the group. You could say, it's a weird thing making videos. There is this aspect to being yourself, but being on, and we could maybe do an episode about that as well. And for the most part, I don't think we're really, in fact, I've never spoken with my wife or daughter about this, so they have their own version of this that they probably never considered, and we've certainly never talked about together. But for the most part, what you see is what you get. That's kind of what happens when we play a game, because we do play games not on camera, it turns out. But once we get through that bookcase, I tweeted a picture out not too long ago of our bookcase of games. We have very few books, lots of games. But once we get through that, the idea actually I have for that series is that we play kind of yard sale games for the most part. And I will give all of the credit to one of my best friends, Matt Amberg. Obviously, I feel like you've heard of him if you're listening to this, but when I last visited his place, we played some games that I believe they had also found at yard sales or maybe thrift shops, however that goes. It was Columbo, and there was even a Flash Gordon game. Just these like flash in the pan, I guess you could say, board games that came out probably as, to even promote the show or something like that. Quite possibly not a lot of thought has gone into them. In fact, the Flash Gordon game was quite obviously just a weird Parcheesi, but still fun in a way. And there's I feel like so much more to mine there with those. So that could be where that series goes, but I don't know how soon that's necessarily going to happen. With the live streams, also not much to mention. I think we're going to keep doing Lego kits, even though I did very recently do a live stream where I just went through and kind of upgraded all the what would you call that, cases, and I've even bought new pocket pages. That wasn't on stream, but I've gone through and kind of upgraded the what would you call that? The things that keep the cards, the collectibles in good condition. There's got to be a word for that, but not a whole lot of those streams in the future is what I'm trying to say. More Lego streams. I've got Wall-E. I've got the NES console. I've got the Atari console, still new in box. My mom, actually, who a theme of this channel should also be how much she's weaponized Ryan Runs against me to purchase probably Christmas and birthday presents at this point. She went and found like my favorite Lego kit from when I was a kid, the Blacktron sets that I had. And I did get one set that was like, I might have even mentioned it when I did the Loop Coaster. One of the reasons we bought that is because it came, if you bought over a certain amount of money from Lego.com, you would get this free Blacktron cruiser that I used to have. Well, she went through and found the Blacktron base that I used to have from some guy in like Hungary or something like that. And I guess it wasn't $1 million, or it might have been. That's, you never know, but got that for me for whatever birthday that was. So that's all on the schedule for live streams. And Ryan Runs, also not much to report there other than, and if everything went correctly, I named this actual podcast episode a prelude to phase 2, because the next Ryan Runs will actually be the new Patreon video wherein I talk about what's in store for Ryan Runs, both to patrons, but also it'll be a Ryan Runs video for YouTube. So that'll be the next one of those. And for the future, I'm not really sure where that series goes, because I'm going to start doing more of these podcasts, hopefully weekly, in fact, because they are a bit more easy to produce than the video thing. But there's got to be a reason for those Ryan Runs videos other than what I hang on the wall and the guitar of the week, if I ever remember to pick that back up. But stay tuned, I guess, for those, as you could say. And as almost an afterthought, the product videos that I tend to do. That's right. The best performing videos on the Ryan Runs YouTube channel are also the ones I appear to have the least amount of control over, in that I just can't keep buying things, apparently. It's the sad truth is that I just can't keep doing that at this point. I know a lot of people, that is, if not the goal, then the thing that happens. And you know, if I've concentrated, if that was the series I concentrated on doing, you know, I might be able to make something of that, but I just don't know if that's what I want for this, is the strange thing. So the product videos end up occupying this very strange space where they're both finite. You know, if I have a thing, I can do a video on it, but also kind of the most nebulous, you know, and I'll point to the video I did about the radio that I took apart, the old radio that we inherited from Candy's family, because that's not a new product, you know, and nobody was looking for that video, but it was also the one I got to be a little bit more creative with. And I don't know if that does anybody any good, honestly, is the thing. And if I continue to get things that I want to share, I will continue to do those videos. But I don't see that happening in any appreciable sense until, you know, people start contacting me to make absolutely no sense about their product for some reason. So keep an eye on those if you really want to see a series figure itself out in real time, while also getting more views than any of my other videos. And that's probably a good segue into the new stuff. When I say the issue of focus isn't necessarily going to be solved right here and now, this is what I'm talking about. So I had a couple ideas, things that came to mind kind of all at once, actually, which is another godsend when it comes to creativity. But if you're ready sometimes to receive it, having that bandwidth can pay off, so to speak. So a few of these you're actually going to see quite possibly within the space of this week if I start feeling a little bit better. I don't want to record an actual video where I'm also sick on camera or recovering on camera. So that's all that depends on. But if not this week, the next. So one of them you're already listening to. It's an actual podcast, you know, longer form, deep dive on maybe some of the things I feel I've learned over the course of my life. You know, I don't want to verge on motivational here and now, but it'll be indulgent. Let's put it that way. So if any of you, this has turned you off already, don't worry, it'll get worse. And I hope you tune in for it. The other things are also known quantities. I'm going to start talking about movies. I had another show with a best friend where we did that, and I kind of relegated that to that sphere, but that has been put on hold, to say the least, for the time being. So I'm going to bring it into the Ryan Runs fold, and I'm going to do so in literally the same way, in that I'm going to continue a series that I started there over here. So if you tuned in to any of the BCFM by myself, where I eventually turned it into me just talking about action films, that's going to take place over here on Ryan Runs now. I'm toying with the title cinematic just because I love things that can't be SEO'd and get lost in the shuffle. I don't know if that'll stick, but it'll have the same intro, the same format, and even the same movie that I said I was going to do next, which I believe is Dirty Ho. So that might show up this week, but more likely the trailer for that will show up this week. And I am going to do kind of what I've done for Chasers and Gameplay. I'm going to have a trailer up front for each series, so you kind of know what you're getting into up top. Seems like a good idea. The other trailer you might see then this week is for a new series I'm going to call A Game in the Life. And this comes from the fact that my gaming habits have changed quite a bit over the last couple years. I used to play a lot of games, and now I play like 2 games. In fact, it's usually one of 2 things. It's whatever I'm playing with my daughter currently, so it's probably a Lego game, although I've learned to space those out. I will play something a little bit more interesting or novel. You know, we played, what was it? What Remains of Edith Finch? Is that the name of that? And she enjoyed it. I mean, there's an entire section where he plays a cat, if I remember correctly. So what's not to love? In fact, Stray might be what we play next, but in between, it'll be a Lego game. And right now we're playing Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, quite possibly. But so it's either something like that or it's Hades, essentially. And what I mean by that is I feel like in a way I've regressed. You know, when I was playing the Nintendo back in the day, I didn't get a lot of games. You couldn't get a lot of, that's not true. Somebody somewhere could get a lot of games, I suppose. That was not me. If I was lucky, I could rent some games, but I did not get a lot of games, let's say. So I would just play one game, you know, and I would memorize every nook and cranny of that game. That's kind of what I've gone back to, for better or worse. I would say better necessarily. Not that I'm not still seeking out new experiences. I think I've recently talked or posted about, when I went to PAX, I posted about how I just, if I've already played something, I don't tend to return to it. Hades would definitely qualify as something new in this regard, but I've played it into the ground. So in games where I feel like that's supported, where I can do that, and it's not just me numbing my mind, I want to do just a one-off show wherein I talk about what I've come to. It's not, I want to be careful. It's not going to be like a guide, because that's something I can also fall into. You know, I've done plenty of achievement guides in my day and whatnot. Not that I won't talk about them in some way, but when I play a game like that, and this is kind of an extension of how I play every game, I don't tend to reach out. You know, I don't go to a lot of third-party websites. I used to be active on a couple forums, and then when those forums died, I just stopped doing forums. So some of this goes by the wayside when I get to the achievement part of a game and I want to complete all the achievements. Sometimes I will look up, well, how do I do this? But most of the time, if I can complete them on my own, that's what I'm going for. So because of that, I feel like I run into some really unique circumstances or habits, which, again, for better or worse, it's just going to be a very personal take on whatever game I choose to talk about. And some of this also comes from the panel I went to at PAX where they talked about Marvel Snap. Another episode I want to do will be on Marvel Snap, where they were like, hey, here are some strategies to rank up. And like most of them were things that I do not do. And not for not wanting to rank up or whatever. You know, I had been down that road as well. But just because it was, again, I don't know how useful this is going to be because it will be so personal, but I don't know. There might be some nuggets in there that could extrapolate into, you know, progression when it comes to playing said game. Because I'm not going to share a game with you wherein I am very, very bad at it because of how I want to play it. That's not usually what happens when I do this thing with these games. Is usually I find, however weird the path might be, it's still a path towards excelling in one way or the other. On Hades, for example, I'm at the very last bit where you don't have to do it. The achievements are done, if that's any definition of what you don't have to do in a game. But there's this basically extra hard difficulty thing that you can do to unlock a final statue, I think is one of the final things I have to do in the game. And I've been doing that for weeks now, but also I don't play as much as I used to. So anywho, that's another series I'm thinking about doing. And lastly, and I absolutely hate this idea. This is the worst idea. I don't want to do it. It's called Awkwords, AWKWORDS. I've had that for a bit. I just didn't know how to use it. And this is how you use it. Wherein I do a podcast with somebody who's never done a podcast before. That's literally the only requirement, which luckily I've ruined my immediate family on that so far. But I guess I haven't spoken about Miller's Meander either, which I did rename because it just Miller's Meandering. It wasn't the right Ryan Rambles, Miller's Meander. So it's had to match. We'll do more of those episodes too, by the way. For Awkwords, it's going to be so unpleasant. I'm not that outgoing. I do have a different mode when it comes to podcasting that might help out, but I'm not looking forward to this. I'm sure I will mention how much I dislike it, but seems like a great idea. So that is phase 2. And maybe the most important thing I could tell you about it is that it's going to be extremely public. And I know if you're tuning in from somewhere other than my garage, it might seem public, but I don't necessarily mention any of this to people I meet in real life, to my existing circle of friends. I don't say, hey, I'm doing a YouTube channel. I don't not say it if it comes up, because it does take up a lot of my time and I have turned down some projects because of it. This is just next level, right? I might get some business cards made. That's how bad it is at this point. I'm not going to be embarrassed to tell anybody that I do podcasts and have a YouTube channel. That's basically what it comes down to. And with any luck, that will translate into some more Patreon subs, and the pitch will all be there in that Ryan Runs video that's coming up next that does turn into the Patreon video. So stick around and look out for that. That's not what this podcast is going to be for. But if you like anything you've seen or heard so far, that's it. The Patreon is it. I might open up some other avenues of income at some point. I know affiliate links are quite useful, and I do have those on my introduction video, but I'm pretty bad at posting those on even the product videos that I make, if that's any indication. So I hope that doesn't turn anybody off, because it's not easy for me to do. Let's put it that way. It never has been. If you look at any of my projects that have come about so far, self-promotion, asking for money to do the thing. If I didn't have to, I wouldn't, is the honest part. If I would love it if money wasn't a thing, period, right? I don't know. Who's with me? But that's not where we're at. And I would love to, maybe this is an arrangement that's as old as time. I would love a patron or two. If this is the type of art you want to see, that's where it's at. So patreon.com/Ryan_runs_. So that's it for Ryan Rambles episode 2. Thanks for hanging out. My gosh, if you got this far especially. And we'll see you next time.